how do you choose the right socks for the footwear you're getting? There's a lot of things to think about when we're talking about socks. All right, even though it seems a relatively minor thing to be thinking about, we're talking about, okay, it's just fabric for my feet. Why is it so important? Well, it depends on the material, depends on a number of different things. So material-wise, most socks are made of wool, a poly or nylon blend, and then cotton, right? We also talk about cushion, right? There's a certain amount of materials or certain socks, whether they be running socks or hiking socks, are gonna have zero or light cushion. They're gonna have full or extra cushion. What does that mean? Do I want a sock that is barely anything and barely comes up to my ankle? Or do I want a sock that goes all the way up to my knee? Which one do I decide there, or anything in between? Do I want lightweight or heavy? Right? Do I want something that's breathable on my feet or heavy and thick to keep my foot warm? So how do I choose with all these different things in mind? Right? Well, first of all, when we're talking about material, cotton used to be the way to go. All right, used to be what everybody wore was cotton socks. And cotton socks are extremely comfortable. Don't get me wrong. They're not the best for outdoor activities. I mean, there's a whole phrase, cotton kills. Not necessarily, but they're just not the best socks to wear when you're out in outdoor activity. The best ones, ironically, are wool. Wool is antimicrobial. It also insulates when it becomes wet. So if you do get water inside your boot, or you build up moisture inside your boot or your shoe, your feet are going to stay relatively warm. And it's also a natural fiber. The natural fiber, though, has a vulnerability. Because it is a natural fiber, it's not as durable as a synthetic fiber. So when we're talking about wool socks, in case of Smart Wool, Darn Tough, Farm to Feet, any of those brands, when we're talking about wool socks, the reality is that those socks are not 100% wool. They're about maybe 60 to 75% wool. The rest of that material is to help with durability and elasticity. So generally, you don't have any cotton in them, but generally you're going to have a blend of nylon and poly in there to help improve the durability of the overall sock and the elasticity, especially around your ankle or where that cuff of the sock is. Now there are socks that are just nylon liners. Those are generally what I would call liner socks. So if I'm wearing, say, a pair of ice climbing boots, or I'm wearing a pair of ski boots, or mountaineering boots, something where I'm in an extreme cold weather climate and I want to throw a liner on. A liner is going to be that first sock I put around my foot, and then I'm going to put the rest of the socks, whether they be ski socks or real thick mountaineering or hiking socks. Things are going to give me the warmth I need and the cushion I need on top of that. Those are only used in specific situations, and so the reality is, for any sort of outdoor hiking activity or activity where you're going to be walking on your feet day in and day out, the wool blend is probably the best sock to buy. And I'm not talking about brand specificity, I'm just talking about in general. Wool socks are probably the best socks to buy. Now, when we talk about lightweight versus heavy, what does that mean? Where would I want a lightweight sock over a heavy sock? Again, it's subjective. It depends on the trip you're doing, all right? Or it depends on the activity you're doing. If I'm just running around, let's say around the lakes in Minneapolis or Detroit or Los Angeles or wherever, and I'm just running on pavement, or even if I'm doing trail running, if I'm out in Colorado, I'm just running on the trails, I don't necessarily need a real thick sock. I want something that's going to be breathable, number one, which wool is also extremely breathable. But I also want something that's going to give me enough material around my foot to protect my foot, but not enough to overheat my foot or give me too much cushion. Generally, when you're running or when you're choosing any footwear, you're looking at stability on the shoe and the cushioning in the shoe to begin with before you even get to your socks. Sometimes, depending on the product, you might need extra cushion in the sock, but for running in particular, we're talking about a trail running shoe, there's a lot of cushion underfoot in trail running because of the amount of impact you're putting on the foot when you run. And so you generally would want to go with something, one, relatively lightweight, and also doesn't have a lot of cushion. Most running socks, whether they be from Smart Wool, Darn Tough, or any other brands that make a wool blend sock, most running socks are going to be zero cushion, right? They're also going to be extremely lightweight, again, because I'm generating a significant amount of body heat. And I'm also in a relatively warm area. Now, go to the other extreme, where I'm going to be in an area where it's relatively cold out. I'm going to want something a little bit heavier, right? I want a hiker, I want a mountaineering sock. Those are also generally going to have a lot more cushion underfoot. Now the reason they have more cushion underfoot is because of when I'm using them primarily. There's a reason this one in particular is called a hiking sock. I am generally going to be wearing this sock the majority of times I'm wearing either a high or a mid-ankle backpacking boot, right? I am constantly putting my feet on the ground on relatively rough terrain. I'm on a trail out in Colorado. I'm on a talus field somewhere in, the Canadian Rockies or in the Alps or somewhere where I'm in an area that's extremely harsh on my feet, but I have the protection in my boot, but I have added protection not only in warmth, but also in cushion on the underneath the foot, okay? So hiking, relatively warm socks, that's where I'm gonna go with relatively heavier duty socks, all right? Now there's actually socks that are in between. When we're talking about full cushion and light cushion, this is kind of where it gets confusing, all right? These are not considered lightweight or heavyweight. These are kind of right in the middle. And this, again, depends on this really depends on where you're gonna be. Am I gonna be in, like if I'm hiking the Spear Hiking Trail, right, and I'm hiking in, say, early spring, and I have a hiking shoe, I'm not carrying a lot of weight, so I'm not wearing a big backpacking boot. What sock might want to get? Well, the shoe that I have is very low cut, it's below my ankle. Based on my description so far, I might go with the sock that has light cushion, and it's got a relatively low ankle. But the reality is that because of the time I'm going, early spring, late fall, when it's a bit colder out, I actually might want to go with something with a little bit more weight to it. So I'm getting the extra warmth in this, I'm getting the extra cushion, and in this case, it actually is going to go above, way above the top of that shoe, which is still good, all right? Now, let's say I'm going in August, right? It's not the height of summer, it's not in July, but it's still relatively warm out. There, I might be okay with a light cushion sock, rather than a full cushion sock. So again, these are things to be thinking about when I'm choosing the sock I'm going to need in relationship to heavier, lightweight. We talked about cushion. Cushion is much like Superfeet, much like other aftermarket things. Cushion is one other thing you can throw into the toolbox when you're talking about creating a solid, comfortable fit for your foot that allows you to get more comfortability out of not only the boot itself, but the other things you're wearing, in this case, your socks. It's going to give you more of that comfortable, nice kind of wool blanket feeling underneath your foot as you're walking. It gives you more cushion, hence the name, underneath that foot as you impact the ground, okay? So if you need that, if you need more arch support, if you have plantar fasciitis, this is a great example, I might want to get a sock, even if it's a heavier sock, that has more cushion underneath the actual foot itself versus something that has no cushion, right? The last thing to consider then also is, okay, do I want something that is high ankle or low ankle, right? Up to the base of my knee, or do I want something that's right above my ankle? That strictly depends on the type of footwear I'm wearing. If I'm wearing a hiking shoe that's relatively low below my ankle, I don't have to have one that goes up to my knee. In fact, unless you're trying to make a statement, you don't necessarily need to have socks that high. But in the case of ski boots or mountaineering boots or something where the boot is significantly high, even winter boots, a lot of times will have real high cuffs. There's a lot of boots that have real tall, high cuffs. Or if I'm wearing muck boots in the boundary waters or bogs or any of those real high work boots, I want a sock that goes up to my knee. Because where that cuff of that boot is, if it's on fresh skin, that's generally where you get a lot of those rashes and issues. Choosing the right sock, as we can tell, is extremely confusing and daunting. And if you come to Midwest Mountaineering and you see the sock wall, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Whether it's Smart Wool or Darn Tough or Farm to Feet, it can be the most confusing part of choosing any item or gear for your feet. If you have any questions, definitely swing into the store. We can definitely help you out. But hopefully, this video gave you some of the answers you're looking for in relationship to those questions on sock selection. We'll see you here in the next video, in the store, and on the trail.